Good evening and welcome to the final of the Speakers Yarning Workshop series. It is workshop number 6 and we're focused tonight on the speech structure, the story structure, the hero's journey, and you'll find that this particular story structure underpins a real lot of stories that you would recognise, and you'll be seeing this everywhere after going through this process. So let's go back and reflect on what's so great about story. Well, the most engaging communications involve story. I'll remind you again that when you're actually talking to a group of people, even one person, you can give them all the dry data that you like. And unless they're a person who is really excited by dry data, it's not going to float their boat. As soon as you launch into a personal story, they lean forward and you're going to capture your audience's interest. We're wired for story. We have it's structured in our brain. We instinctively know the structures of story. We know the archetypal narratives. We know this hero's journey. We know that if a story starts a certain way, it has to end in a certain way. We know that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're waiting for that end, and we're waiting for things to end in a certain way. If this is the way that they start, we're wired for this. It's in our brain, and we know because stories exist across all human cultures, across time, and there are specific story structures that are recognisable across all human cultures, across time, and across all genres of storytelling. It has to be in our brain. We're actually more likely to remember detail presented in story form, and this is potentially a Darwinian thing, that if we were instructed about where to find the food to eat and how to create the best spear or where the dangers lie, and we're instructed about those things in the context of story, then we're far more likely to remember them and survive, hence the Darwinian aspect of this remembering detail presented in story form. But story also has the ability to build connections, grow empathy, compassion, and trust. When we listen to a well-told story, there are chemicals that are released in the brain. We have feel-good chemicals released, and then we also have the chemicals associated with actually experiencing the event. So when neuroscientists have wired people up to watch their brains when they're actually listening to a well-told story, they found that the same centers in the brain light up, the same things show in their brain as the person who's having the actual experience. That has to be the definition of empathy. To hear a well-told story and to have the experience in the brain is the same thing. Story must be infinitely powerful. But the hormones that are also released while you're telling story help people to feel empathetic towards you and towards your cause. So if you want people to listen to what you say, to remember the message that you're presenting, and to support what it is that you're saying or the cause that sits behind the words that you're presenting, it makes so much sense to use story as your vehicle. So these yarning workshops, the workshops where we are focusing on storytelling, are all about learning about, preparing, and practicing for telling engaging and influential stories. And all of these speakers' workshops, they're here to develop your skills, knowledge, and confidence so you can speak up, speak well, and be heard. And I am Angela Tomlinson, speaker, author, coach, educator. And my mission is to allow you to transform your life through opportunity, education, and reflection. I have discovered that when I look back in my life, I've always been concerned about inequities of gender. And this was driven by the fact that my stepfather would tell me I can't do things because I'm a girl. So whenever I hear anything like that, whenever I sense that there's a gender inequity, that that we can't do things because we're women, it just makes me angry, and it makes me mission bound to make changes. And there's, in this world of entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs where we're expecting the world to be equal, it's actually not. The reality is that there are far more men in entrepreneurial positions than women. There are far more men owning their own businesses than there are women owning their own businesses. In Australia, in the last year, 22% of the startups were women. That's a significantly low proportion, considering the fact we're supposed to be experiencing equality, and that we've come out of an era of COVID where so many people are going into their own business and being entrepreneurial. What's going on? And the other aspect is that women are not actually getting the same level of funding as men when they go to ask for money to support their new business ventures or any of their business ventures. In fact, I read that there is a $1.7 trillion deficit in gender for women looking for funding for their business opportunities compared to men. That's a real illustration of inequity. And I have also read there are a couple of things that stand in the way of women actually getting what it is that they need to be successful in business. And one of those things is confidence. Confidence in your business idea and confidence in yourself. Confidence in my business idea, confidence in myself. And you know, I've found, and I'll come back to this later on tonight, I found that I have had an exponential growth in my confidence since I've been working on this public speaking journey. By focusing on this particular skill, by growing this particular skill, by doing all of the things that I need to do to become a really good, effective communicator and public speaker, I've had a ripple effect across my life. And that ripple effect is amazing, and perhaps more like a snowball than a ripple, because ripples die out, but snowballs grow. And my snowball is immense. My life is completely different now to what it was before I actually embarked on this public speaking journey. And my whole life is lived for joy. I'm busy. I feel successful. I've achieved so many things, and I love speaking. And all of those things, the new abilities that I've got, the capacity to gather my ideas together in the moment and share them, the confidence to stand up and ask for what I want, to set boundaries, to choose for myself what I want in my career pathway, to be able to say no. Amazing. I want that for you. And I know that how I got here was through developing my public speaking, and I can take you along on that journey with me. And that's what I'm all about, as an underlying mission beneath teaching you how to tell story. And while we're yarning, I bet you've noticed I've got a lovely cherry on my lip. Oh, it's backwards. So I was reaching up into the cupboard, pulling down a very high box that was quite weighty. And on top of the box, unbeknownst to me, because it was above eye level, was some heavy things that when I tipped the box, fell straight on my face. So I have the joy of having a fat lip that's rather cherry coloured at the moment. So hello, I thought I'd address the elephant in the room. Shall we move on? All right. So in my journey, I've actually come to understand how to become a confident and masterful public speaker, to be able to speak up, speak well, and be heard. I've discovered that there's three keys: that it's knowledge, that it's skills, that it's confidence, that you need to know how to speak well. You need to actually understand the genre and gather that knowledge in your head to fill from the top. You also need the skills. you need to be able to walk the walk. You need to do it. You can only get better at doing something by actually doing it. And this is the bottom-up stuff. And then there's the bit that sits in that heart space where the things meet in the middle, and that is confidence. And we need to make sure that we're working on our confidence so we become those confident and masterful public speakers that we desire to be, and have all of those snowballing effects that I promise will happen with you just as they did with me if you're on the same journey. All right, your icebreaker. What is something you have overcome? Tell us about it. And let me tell you mine. So my great overcoming, it really is in this public speaking space. I was not always a confident public speaker. I didn't know I wasn't. So I had been a teacher for a really long time, and I had been working on becoming, earning a promotional position. And finally I'd won one. And then I was in this job and I was in a new school, and I was asked to speak to a community forum about my vision for this program that I was in charge of. I had no problem with that. I'd spoke in front of classes, I've spoken in front of assemblies, I've done all kinds of public speaking. I welcome the opportunities. But when I got up in front of this forum, all of a sudden I had an anxiety attack, whooshing in my ears, like my mouth went dry, my palms went sweaty. I had no idea to this minute what I said in that moment. I could only describe it as public speaking anxiety. And then it kind of contrasted with what I actually perceived of me as myself. That's not who I see myself as. I'm not anxious. I'm actually pretty confident. So what is going on here? And eventually I admitted to myself that I actually did have public speaking anxiety, and that this had actually been happening for some time. When I eulogized my grandmother's funeral, when I got up in front of assemblies, when I stood in front of a class for the first 6 weeks of every year, and I had to plan to the nth degree. I had public speaking anxiety. I didn't know it. And then I did. And then I had to do something about it. And so I did. And I embarked on my journey to fix it. And I feel like I have. Now over to you. If you would like to come up with your icebreaker, and you can share it on the Facebook page, or you can tell it to your phone, so long as you've actually expressed what that is, then you'll have done what you need to do to continue on in this journey. Okay, your speech should have, I should have said this before, a beginning, a middle, and an end. You might say what your challenge was, who was involved, what problems it caused, what were your actions, what you did about it, in the end, how did things turn out, and keep it succinct, keep it pretty small, because you're going to build on this tonight with the hero's journey speech structure. And once you've done that, I can congratulate you for diving straight in. No one gets away without speaking in our workshops. Every workshop involves people speaking every single time. And this is the only way to get better. The only way you improve your speaking is to speak. And I think you'll find that everybody who does my workshops has a level of growth from actually speaking every single time. Okay, let's do some revision. What have we learned about oral storytelling so far? First of all, we learnt that a story can be told about anything. It's all in the detail. We also learnt that a story has a conflict and a resolution. And when you're actually creating a story, the detail must be relevant. The detail must be relevant to the conflict and relevant to the resolution. If you're actually keeping to one perspective, it needs to be all negative, all positive. If you're having a change, then that needs to be reflected in your detail as well. But everything needs to be relevant. Don't keep extraneous detail in there. People don't want to hear the blah, 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 blah. They want to hear what is actually relevant to what you're saying. Language can be precise. We have created a word climb where we actually looked at a word and brainstormed many, many words that mean the same thing. And then we've listed them from one extreme to the other to actually find that there is this kind of minute detail that distinguishes the meaning of each of those synonyms from each other. And if we can choose the right synonym, then we can convey such specific meaning in one word that we might not otherwise convey by using something that is banal. Language can be emotive. It can reveal how we feel about something simply by choosing a word. And if we take the example of words that describe a house, a hovel is a house that you certainly wouldn't be approving of. A home is something that you would welcome entering into. And then you can be a little bit more perhaps less precise by using words like shack. Now, a shack, to a person who thinks that living a little bit more roughly is not a great thing, they prefer to have 5-star accommodation, they're not going to think a shack is a great thing. But a person who wants to get away from things and live in a place that's simple and perhaps right on the ocean, they're going to just love the idea of a shack. So also your audience needs to be considered when you're choosing the language of emotion to describe something. Language can be immersive. When we use the language of poetry, metaphors, similes, figures of language, then we're actually bringing our audience into the experience. They really get to feel and hear and see and smell and taste what it is that we're saying. And that poetic language actually overlays another experience onto the one that we're describing. So we transpose experience, and people can see one thing as being like another. And it really immerses them in what you're describing, particularly if it's something that they haven't experienced before. Then we went into characterization and discovered that characterization happens both through show and tell. So we can tell someone how a character is, but we can also show them with the techniques of characterization by using speech, what they say, how they say it, by using actions, what they do, by using appearance, what they wear, how they look, their gestures, by using the opinions of others, other characters, or other real people, if the story is true, by looking at symbols, symbolic stuff, settings, colours, things that represent other stuff. So, for example, if we look at a leather jacket representing a level of rebellion, white being symbolic of purity, and those things actually help to show character as opposed to deliberately, specifically telling someone what a character is like. And characters can be sympathetic or antipathetic. So they can be characters that we warm to or characters that we reject. Then we moved on to setting, and setting creates the emotional mood of a story. And when we describe a place, we really need to use those 5 senses so we immerse a person in that story, in that setting, and they get to really sort of feel, see, smell, taste, touch how that setting is. And setting actually foreshadows an outcome or a plot direction. So if you are expecting things to be happy and lovely, there might be the hint of that. If we're expecting things to be a little bit foreboding, we're going to see that just the same. Then we moved into narrative structures, which we're continuing on with tonight. And last time we looked at the 7 archetypal narratives. Oh, let's see if I can crack them out. We've got overcoming the monster, the quest, rags to riches, the tragedy, the comedy, journey and return, and rebirth. And the interesting thing about those is that we have expectations of them, and we can actually tap into people's expectations of story to have them vie for the ending that we want them to vie for, create characters that they want to succeed in the narrative, and really have people supporting what we want them to support. So let's move on. And this week, it's the hero's journey. And this is an absolutely recognisable and common story structure. It's really, really useful in illustrating and overcoming. It's quite often used in business pitching and has very clear and structured elements. And some things that I think are really useful when we understand structure when we're giving speeches, story or otherwise. So structure actually gives us the opportunity to, if we know a structure really well, we don't have to memorize a speech. If we're telling a story, the story's our own anyway. If we know the structure and we can follow the structure, then we can actually give a speech that's cohesive, that's really well structured, simply by following the structure instead of the speech itself. And then with story, if we're using story structures that are recognisable, that are patterned in our brains, then we're going to be able to tap into all of that stuff that is wired into humans to help people to be supportive of our stories, our characters, our end game, if you like, all the way along. Okay, so let's have a look at the story structure. So what I want you to do while we're going through this is to listen to each element of the hero's journey. What I might do is flick through them first and then come back to them. And what I want you to do is for each element, think about the story that you told in the icebreaker and create the story based on those elements. You may have to embellish a little bit to start with, but you'll find that you'll be able to create stories that really fit this structure based on your own experience. And it's a very, very powerful story structure. So let's skip through and then come back. So the story structure, we've got the ordinary world, call to adventure, refusal of the call, meeting with a mentor, crossing the threshold, tests, allies, enemies, approach to the innermost cave, the supreme ordeal, reward or seizing the sword, the road back, resurrection, return with the elixir. Let's go from the start. Okay, the story structure. The ordinary world. So this is the ordinary world of the hero, which has some kind of deficiency. Something's wrong. There's something lacking or there's something taken away. You know, Star Wars use this story structure so explicitly. So be thinking about Star Wars Episode 4, Luke Skywalker sitting in his workshop where he's working on the electronic things and just not loving life at all. This story structure is just so explicit to that. So for me, with my story, my work world, I wasn't quite achieving as I expected to achieve. Maybe I felt overlooked, like something was missing, like I wasn't actually truly happy with the job that I was in, felt dissatisfied and maybe a little bit ungrateful because, you know, I was in a pretty good job and I shouldn't have been feeling like this. The call to adventure. So the hero is given a challenge, a problem or adventure, and often it appears as a blunder or a chance, which establishes the goal of the hero. So for me, I have won this promotional position. Excuse me for a second. So I've won this promotional position. Oops, I need to go back. I can't seem to. Oh, story structure, ordinary world, call to adventure. So I won a promotional position, and after I'd won that position, I was actually asked to speak at a community forum. And in that community forum, I actually had a public speaking anxiety attack. And my call to action is the next step. Oh, hello. My call to adventure was that I felt like I really needed to do something about it. So the hero is given a challenge, a problem, or an adventure, often appears as a blunder or a chance, and this establishes the goal of the hero. For me, the goal is to overcome this public speaking anxiety. The hero refuses the call. They're often reluctant and has to be set along the correct path, weighing the consequences and actually deciding whether and need to be excited or driven by that strong motivation to proceed further. And for me, it's like, what do I do about it? How do I proceed? Is it actually really necessary? Why would I actually invite the anxiety of public speaking to improve what's going on for me? Then the meeting of the mentor. The hero encounters a wise figure who helps prepare for the journey. This figure gives advice, guidance, or an item that can't go with the hero. Well, for me, I started my Toastmasters journey as well as doing all kinds of other things to actually help me to develop my public speaking, and was assigned a mentor. And that mentor I worked with really closely to develop my public speaking skills. Crossing the threshold, the hero faces danger, often a life or death moment that's either physical or psychological. So for me, I decided to extend my comfort zone, and I worked with my mentor, and we both decided that we would put on a public speaking event that was bigger, that was really formal, and really challenge ourselves, because doing a 5 to 7 minute Toastmasters speech in front of our local club wasn't cutting it anymore. We needed more. So we decided that we would put on this event, and we gathered some people together to be speakers in the event, including ourselves, and we practiced. So we'd come to the same place each week. We would have these weekly practice sessions for 8 weeks before the event actually started. We set ourselves a pretty tight timeline. Excuse me while I have a sip of a drink. And those practices were pretty big, pretty full on. But we had each other, and we'd look after each other, and we'd share with each other what we needed to do to improve. Something else that I actually did also was to take on a neurochange practitioner course. So I actually learned about the plasticity of the brain and learned some skills and strategies to be able to improve my mindset and convince my brain that it was plastic, and to be able to tap into strategies that I knew would work to give me the right mindset to be able to take on challenges. So then, the approach to the innermost cave, with our hero and his allies, often, for me, all of them, have come to the edge of the dangerous place where the object of the quest is hidden. It says here this stage is often the land of the dead. For me, very much not so. So here we are, it's the day of the event, and I'm managing my nerves and having to deal with all of that sort of stuff, as well as the organisational stuff, because myself and my mentor were putting this event on. So it was pretty hectic. So I did all of the things that I felt I needed to do to be able to do that, and remain task-oriented and focused on what I needed to do. And then the supreme ordeal, this is when I actually got up and gave the speech. So the hero faces danger, often life or death, either physical or psychological. For me, it was that getting up, giving the speech, working the audience, and being in that moment. And then the reward, or seizing the sword. So the hero survives that event and takes possession of the object, a treasure, a weapon, knowledge token, or reconciliation. So for me, it was nailing that speech, and really having taken on the monster and worked off the energy of the audience to engage with them, and really nailing that speech in the moment. We have the road back. So the hero then has to deal with the consequences of their actions. or they could be pursued by remaining forces and face the decision to return to the ordinary world. That's an interesting one for me. So I'd walked off this stage having nailed this speech, and I felt high for days, like probably 3 days after having done this thing, which was so big for me. And then I had to come back to the ordinary world and go, well, I've done this thing. I have this knowledge. I have this capacity. What do I do now? And then we have the resurrection, this final test for the purification and rebirth of the hero, or it could be a miraculous transformation. For me, the resurrection, I'd grown. I was just so much more than I was before. That experience that I had, the learning that I did, the work that I'd put in, and the achievement meant that I had done 3 things. I changed my life. I felt like I needed to share my skills and knowledge, and I knew I had to keep speaking. And then we have the return with the elixir. The triumphant hero returns to the ordinary world bearing the elixir. Common elixirs are treasure, love, freedom, wisdom, knowledge. Defeated hero is deemed to repeat the lesson. We're not doing defeated heroes. This is all about having achieved, overcome, and having come away with something. So for me, it was wisdom and knowledge. And I feel the need to share this wisdom and knowledge, to be able to share with other women like myself who are feeling the same things, and take them on the same journey that I have, so they experience the growth that I've also experienced as a result of the journey that I can take them on. So it's think time. Take some time to bring it all together. Grab all of those things and put them into a single, organised speech. It's going to be that story from the icebreaker, and you are going to retell that story applying the hero's journey narrative structure. Okay. So now it's time to actually give your speech, to practice speeching. We stick to that outline and be descriptive but concise. And we really want to aim in this speech for 5 to 7 minutes. See what the next slide is. Okay. So I'm going to give you my speech. My world of work, I should have been more satisfied, but for some reason I wasn't. There was some level of deficiency. I wanted to get a promotional position. I'd been applying for a few. I'm a pretty good teacher, been doing it for a long time, and really struggled to get a promotional position. I had so much going on for me that I actually felt perhaps like I was a bit ungrateful. But then I won a promotional position, and it was a great job. And again, still something not quite right. I was asked to speak at a community forum, and I actually welcomed that opportunity because I've never actually shied away from public speaking. I have had experience of anxiety, but never really labelled it, never had a problem with it per se, and never walked away from an opportunity to actually speak. And so there I was, and I'd stood up to share with a community forum of probably 200 or 300 people my vision for a program that I was running in a school. Unfortunately, when I stood up, all of a sudden I was overcome by bodily reactions. My mouth went dry. My throat felt like it was closing up. I had a whooshing in my ears. My heart heartbeat seemed to be racing out of my chest. My palms were sweaty, and when I opened my mouth to speak, my throat clicked. I have no idea what I said to that bunch of people to this day. I had a panic attack. And I thought, I have to do something about this. But what do I do? I've got no idea what to do about this. How do I actually proceed? And is it really necessary? Do I have to fix this? Do I have to face this anxiety? Do I have to embrace it, take it on, and defeat it? Or can I just slink away and not do anything about it at all? Would confronting it make actually any difference? In the end, I actually decided I would join Toastmasters. And so I did. And I was appointed a mentor. And in addition to joining Toastmasters, I also embraced opportunities to learn, like doing a university level online course and taking courses on Udemy and watching other speakers speak and analysing their speaking and observing really good speakers and not so good speakers and deciding what I thought worked and what I thought didn't work and thinking about that in myself. I took every opportunity to speak. And eventually I developed a new comfort zone of speaking. I found that I was just so comfortable with public speaking in this little club environment that I was in. I needed something more. I worked with my mentor and we'd been driving each other to be better. We decided it was time to create something bigger, to challenge ourselves. And so we decided we would put on a public speaking event that would be formal, that would be in a black box theatre and have a sellout audience and very few speakers, but we would do a 20 to 30 minute speech each. This was pretty challenging, and we were going to do this within 8 weeks. So we chose our team and we worked together with this team in the same place for 8 weeks. Every week we would work on our speeches. We'd repeat the same speech. We'd develop them. We would listen to each other's feedback to each other. That was challenging as well, because most often we were focusing on what was not working with our speeches rather than what was working. And I'm not very good with negative feedback. I really work much better when I'm being told what I'm getting right. In the same time, I was undertaking a neuropractitioner course. So I was learning about the plasticity of the brain and the strategies that we can use to make sure that we convince our brain, we convince ourselves, excuse me, that we're capable of change. We had some challenges, and the most significant challenge for me was that very last practice session. I had a migraine. I'd taken some pills to get rid of the migraine. That made me a little bit high. I'd had a glass of wine to try and settle my nerves and decided I actually needed to do my practice because I had to. And if I could actually do that and do my speech and get through to the other side, that's got to help. I did that. And it was probably the worst version of my speech I'd ever done in the whole time that we were practicing. But at least I knew what the worst had looked like. And then it came to the day of the event. Nerves were the dish of the day. This was really interesting because we had to manage ourselves. I had to manage myself. I had to deal with this feeling of anxiety that was welling in me. And the first thing I did was to actually think about anxiousness as the same bodily feeling as excitement, and just change my thinking to, I'm excited about this, not I'm nervous about this. I'm excited. I'm really excited. I also did some exercise to burn off some nervous energy. I meditated to calm my nervous system. I visualized being successful in the moment. I did some practice so I knew that I knew my stuff. And then it was time to go to the event. And I was there and I was very task-oriented, getting organised, making sure things were set up. And then people started to filter in. And that's when I started to really find my rhythm. This connecting with people, talking with them, it actually helped to build my energy for standing in front of the audience and connecting with them in that forum. So then it was time to give my speech. And I really did take on the monster. I stood before that packed black box theatre and I nailed my speech. I had the audience in the palm of my hand. I was able to interject humour and connect with people within the audience and really feel like I'd got my message across, that we'd been on an emotional journey together. I walked off that speech. I walked off that stage feeling $1 million. And I held that high. I held that high 3 days. And then I had to come down and think, what's next? What do I do with this? How do I consolidate this success and bank on it and do something more? How do I build on this? I'd grown. I was so much more confident. I had my experience as a Toastmaster. I had some learning as a public speaker. I had learned how to work an audience so successfully. I was really a new person and I had to do something with this. And I did set about doing some things. And all of them were about changing my life. And I did change my life. I changed my life by changing my job, by writing a book, and starting a business. I changed my life because I decided I would share my new skills and wisdoms, my new knowledge about public speaking. And I changed my life because I knew that speaking was my new thing. It actually floats my boat. And I decided I would keep doing it. So I am now committed to sharing my knowledge, my skills, this proprietary program that I've developed because of all of the things I've been through, because I actually know how to become this confident, capable public speaker who can speak up, speak well and be heard. I want this for everybody, and I want the resulting experience in the rest of people's lives to be the same for them as it is for me. So I've established a business. I want to help my fellow intra and entrepreneurs to speak up, speak well and be heard. I want to give other women like me that opportunity to have the amazing growth that can occur from going through this development of public speaking as a growth journey, because I know exactly how. And this is how we got to be here today. All right, so the next part of our workshops is always about growing confidence. So once you've actually done your speech and recorded it, listened back or put it on the Facebook page, let's think about this, growing confidence. Have you ever considered essential oils? In my neurochange course, I came to understand from brain research, from research-based information, from actual data, that we can do things that are either naturally imbued with power or that we imbue with power. Either way, they have the same effect. If you fundamentally believe that essential oils have power, they're going to work. If you give those essential oils power, they're going to work. You just have to believe in them, right? So either they work because they work, or they work because you believe they work. Either way, they work. So let's have a think about essential oils. I want to give an example of how essential oils have really worked for me. I gave a TED talk this year, a TEDx talk, And my friend Brett Della, Dr. Brett Della, was also doing a TEDx talk, and he had used some oil, and he offered in the makeup room to share his essential oil with us all. And I was feeling a bit nervous, and I thought, I don't really need that. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to take it. And I did. And it was really interesting because once I'd actually taken that elixir, it really improved my confidence and my feeling of capacity to nail my speech beyond what it was before. I was feeling a bit nervous, and this really took the edge off my nervousness. I didn't want to miss out. It was that kind of fear of missing out that made me take it in the first place. And I'm so glad that I did, because I really benefited from rubbing the oil that he shared on my pulse point. There are many essential oils that claim to impact confidence, and you can probably go to your local oil distributor to come up with a confidence mixture that's going to suit you. The one that really stands out when you do your research on the internet is ylang ylang, but there are many, and lots of them are citrus oriented, that suggest that they are confidence building, anxiety busting oils that will help you to step into that space and be confident. So whether you actually believe implicitly in the power of oil, or you think we imbue oil with power, it doesn't matter, so long as we believe that it has the capacity to improve us. Give it a go. Try believing. Be confident. It's time for you to think now about what you might have learned today. What have you learned today? And when you've thought about that, maybe journal it, because the best way to actually consolidate learning is to reflect on it and repeat it, bring it back in your mind. And if you can do that now, and you can do it tomorrow, and you can do it in a week, and you can do it in a month, that learning is going to be cemented in your brain forever. So what's next? So we have another series of fortnightly workshops that will commence in February. We're going to have some yarning speaking events that I'm yet to announce, but I'm hoping to have one locally in November, potentially a Perth one in January. So if you're available, come along or take part. And I'm always available for one-to-one coaching if that's what you're after. I can make it bespoke, or we can repeat and delve deeper into what you've been learning here or in the other workshops that I've delivered. It's completely up to you and negotiable. So we have covered using descriptive and poetic language, using characterization, creating atmosphere, story structures, story as a vehicle for a message, and speaking with confidence. Tick, 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 tick. So remember, you have all of these workshop recordings sent to you via an email link, and you can revisit this learning at any time, so long as it exists on YouTube. Also, I want you to remember that learning is incremental, that you will learn about the genre of public speaking. You'll implement that knowledge by speaking. You'll grow your understanding of it and your ability to speak over time. It's a growing, broadening spiral, and it's a journey. And we always work at growing our confidence and expanding our comfort zone. And I want to thank you. Thank you for attending this workshop series. Thanks for being part of Angela Tomlinson Speakers. And remember that if you stick with me, if you maintain your loyalty, then you maintain the payment amount that you made here today for this workshop series. And that means that I could be delivering workshop series in the future when I'm super famous for $5,000 for a 6-week course, and you'll still be paying what you paid today if you stay with me and remain loyal. So talk to me about that. Shout out to Slides Mania. Thank you for your slides template. And that is the end of the yarning workshop. The Hero's Journey, Story Structures, the Hero's Journey, number 6, and also the end of our yarning series. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next series.